Hi everybody, welcome to the paper on methods of child study. Hope you have enjoyed the part of the module on child guidance and counseling. The next part follows with the method of child study. The theories of child development in general guide us in predicting the behavior or performance of a child, termed as hypothesis for a research. But sound research in child development needs many more things apart from theory and hypothesis. A researcher should decide on the nature of subjects, the sample size, what the subjects will be asked, when and how. It is only then the relationships can be examined and conclusions can be inferred. This module will provide you a better understanding of the most commonly employed research strategies for children, in particular under three major heads, namely developmental designs, research designs, and methods of data collection. At the end of this module, you will be able to comprehend the developmental designs adopted to study children, develop an insight into the various research designs used to study children and its shortcomings, understand the different methods of data collection. Now on to the first part, the developmental designs. To answer the question of how do children change in due course of time in a scientific manner, the researchers in the field of child development starts with a research question or hypothesis as any other research. Hypothesis is nothing but a research statement or question that would be tested by reflecting on what the researcher wants to find out. Consider the following examples in understanding this part of the module. The question is, how do sibling relationships change among children in their 6th, 12th, and 18th year? The first step in doing this research will be to determine the type of study that tells us the most about the changes that happen in their sibling relationship. While trying to identify the method, a researcher comes out with two possible approaches. The first one is, do I want to observe the changes over an extended period within a single population of children in their 6th year and then in their 12th year and later in their 18th year? Or the second question is, do I want to compare the sibling relationships among different population of children in their 6th, 12th and 18th year at the same point of time? The first approach is referred to as the longitudinal method of studying children, and the second one is called the cross-sectional method. Now let us see the definitions of both approaches. The first one being longitudinal study. It refers to a research design wherein one single population is studied over and over again at different ages or periods of their lifespan. The cross-sectional study refers to a research design wherein various group of subjects at different ages or periods of their lifespan are studied at the same point of time. Now, let us know about the benefits and purpose of each of these approaches for a better insight. The longitudinal design. It is an observational study where the researchers are in continuous process of observing the same subject over a relatively longer duration. To return to the example specified already to you, the study would observe the needed subject or subjects in their 6th year and then again when they attain their 12th year and consequently during their 18th year. So the study would take 12 years to get completed. Though it's a time-consuming approach, there are certain benefits. First one is the possibility of deducting development or its related changes at the individual level over the span of research is more. The second benefit is that the subject, when studied repeatedly at different ages, the sequence of events could be easily traced. The third benefit is that this approach is more likely to suggest cause and effect relationship as it accounts for the development of sibling relationship from 6th year to 18th year and changes that occur over time. However, apart from the benefits, there are certain pitfalls of this approach. These type of studies could be conducted with only a small group of subjects. So, generalization to larger population becomes difficult. The second pitfall is that the subject's dropout rate is high and hence the data prediction becomes complex. Moreover, by continuously studying a particular subject for a long time, it might influence a subject to react wisely to the testing situations and results in contamination of results. Cohort effect is another major pitfall. Cohort effect occurs due to the cultural and historical changes on the consistency of the findings. That is, while studying a group of children born at a different period may not have the pattern of development when compared with children born in another period. In order to alleviate the pitfalls of longitudinal design, researchers developed the cross-sectional design. As longitudinal approach, the cross-sectional design also has the certain benefits, and the cross-sectional design of studying children is carried out by observing the subject. To make it simpler, the researcher records the information without manipulating the environment. The major success of this type of study is because of its scope of comparing different population groups at a single point of time. Hence, the time span for this type of study is relatively short when compared to longitudinal study. Moreover, the factors that influences changes over time, both historical and sociological, gets minimized in this. However, the cause and effect relationship could not be traced by this approach as done in longitudinal design, because the subject sharing the same cultural and historical experiences but at different periods of lifespan would have caused the changes in spite of their age-induced changes. Also, this type of study that covers a wide range of age span faces a potential difficulty of cohort effect as in the longitudinal approach. Then what next? If not longitudinal study and if not cross-sectional, what is the next design that we are going to adopt? That's called as the longitudinal sequential design. In order to overcome the potential difficulties of both the designs explained above, the child development researchers tried to improve the developmental designs and arrived at a new design called longitudinal sequential design. This design is a combination of both longitudinal and cross-sectional approach. Hence, this longitudinal sequential design is referred to as a research design, wherein a group of subjects born at different times are followed over a short span of time. Hence, the disadvantage of longer duration of longitudinal study could be conquered, and moreover, the cohort effect of both the designs is also minimized as careful comparative analysis of historical and cultural changes could be observed. Turning to the same example of sibling relationship provided to you already, the answer to both the questions could be answered by one design called longitudinal sequential design at this diagram. In this illustration, there were 3 children in their 6th, 12th and 18th year. They were studied in the year 2006 with reference to their nature of sibling relationship, and in the same way another 3 children during the year 2010. The green lines in the illustration indicate the comparison of children born at different periods and thereby accounting to the longitudinal design. The blue lines show the cross-sectional comparison. Say for example, a child of 6 years is studied in 2 different periods at 2006 and in 2010. Hence, a pitfall of both the longitudinal and cross-sectional design is the cohort effect, which gets resolved in this new design. The red lines compares a 6-year-old child studied in the year 2006 with a 12-year-old child studied in 2010 and 12-year-old in 2006 with 18-year-old in 2010. So now, after having a better insight into the developmental designs, it's time to step in on to the research designs. After identifying the right developmental design for a hypothesis set, the method of testing it should be recognized, for which an understanding of the major research designs is essential. Research design refers to the overall plan of a research to test the hypothesis formulated. The type of design has to be decided by the researcher to test a set hypothesis with a possible greater certainty. Generally, two major designs are adopted to study child behavior. They are correlational design and experimental design. The first is correlational design. This design involves the gathering of information from individuals without altering their environmental settings, even at a minimal level, and looks at relationship between variables. In the correlational studies, the relationship are examined by a term called correlation coefficient, which describes of how the two variables are associated with one another. The correlation coefficient ranges from +1 to -1, where 0 indicates no relationship between variables and +1 and -1 refers to strong relationship. The sign plus or minus shows the direction of a relationship. Positive sign shows positive correlation, which means as one variable increases, the other also increases. The negative sign explains negative correlation and indicates that as one variable increases, the other decreases. For example, consider the hypothesis: do the mother's interacting style influence the child's intelligence? In this hypothesis, two variables, namely mother's interacting style and child's intelligence, has to be measured. A positive correlation could illustrate that both the variables move in the same direction. In other words, when mother's interacting style increases, the child's intelligence increases. A negative correlation becomes an evidence for the variables moving in opposite direction, which means that when the mother's interacting style increases, the child's intelligence decreases. But the zero correlation confirms no effect between these. Though the direction of relationship between variables could be identified by correlation studies, the cause and effect of this relationship cannot be ascertained, because the evidence is not just enough to conclude whether it is only the mother's interaction influence the intelligence level of the child, as the opposite is also certainly possible. An intelligent child's behavior would have prompted mother's favorable interaction. Moreover, the interaction effect would have been influenced by a third extraneous variable that had not been accounted in the study at all. In order to overcome these shortcomings of correlational study, experimental design of research came into practice. Experimental design. It's a design which determines the cause and effect of a relationship. For an experimental study, the researcher considers certain events and behavior of the subject related to the study and classifies into two variables, namely independent and dependent variable. Independent variable is a variable thought by the researcher to influence another variable, whereas a dependent variable or the variable expected by the researcher to be influenced by the independent variable. By controlling and manipulating changes in the independent variable, the cause and effect of a relationship would be inferred. The changes in the independent variable can be done by subjecting the sample of interest to one or more conditions of treatment, and the behavior or performance could be compared based on the dependent variable. Consider the example: do the quality of interaction between adults influence a child's emotional behavior while playing with a known peer? Here, the interaction between adults serves as an independent variable, wherein it could be manipulated by the researcher in two ways. In one way, two adults interact in a friendly way in a warm environment in a corner of a room, and the child is playing with the known peer in another corner of the room. In another setting, the two adults get involved in an argument and expresses behavior like shouting, slamming the door, etc. Again, the child will be playing with a known friend in another corner of the same room. The child playing with a known friend becomes the dependent variable that undergoes no alteration. The researcher observed that the children in a hostile setting, that's the second setting, showed aggressiveness and are found to be distressed when compared to the children in warm and however, the challenge on the part of the researcher in an experimental study is that he or she should take special care to control the unknown traits or characteristics of the subjects involved, as this would hamper the accuracy of the findings. In the study just explained, there is a possibility that those children who are already exposed to an unfriendly environment exhibits aggressiveness irrespective of the manipulated settings. Thereby, the study cannot conclude that it is only because of the independent variable the child's emotional reaction changes. But again, how to overcome this problem? This problem can be overcome by using two methods. One is random assignment, and second one is matching. In the random assignment, the subjects being picked up randomly increases the chance of equal distribution of the subject characteristics. In matching, the subjects are measured for behavior of interest, here aggressiveness for the above said example, ahead of the actual research, and then randomly assigned based on their level of aggression to every treatment. Now, on to the third part of this module, methods of data collection. After looking into the benefits and pitfalls of the developmental designs in child study, and after identifying a particular relevant research design to conduct the study, what is next? The next step is to identify how to gather data or information from the subjects of interest. Some major methods of data collection are through observation, self-reports, which is made possible through interview and questionnaires, and then case studies. On to the first method called the observation. As the term indicates, the information is gathered by mere observation of the subject and recording his or her behavior as it happens. This method is again divided into two, namely naturalistic and structured observation. Naturalistic observation refers to observation of subjects in real world setting. In other words, observation happens in natural setting without any manipulation. For example, observing a child of 6 to 8 years in his own classroom setting and recording the behavior of the child with key reference to the number of times the child extends physical and emotional support to his friend in the form of sharing, helping, comforting, expressing kindness or sympathy serves as a good method of studying child's social development. However, every child being observed doesn't get the chance of expressing every form of social behavior at a particular time. To bridge this gap of observation, one another technique called the structured observation got into practice. Structured observation is a method wherein the researcher observes a subject in a laboratory setting by controlling all other environmental factors. In other words, the researcher provides cue for the display of needed behavior. For example, the researcher observes the helping nature of a child by providing a situation wherein an adult spills a box of pencils and records the child's response to the situation. Though this method of observation provides the researcher with more control over the natural setting, again it has its own flaws, as we cannot expect a child to behave in the artificial setting as they do in the natural setting. Hence, observation could only provide us with certain information on how the children behave. It should be supported with certain other methods of child study to reason out the motive that lies behind their behavior, for which self-report in the form of interview and questionnaires takes its position. Self-report method of child study is one method that could fill the gap of observation methods. These reports are methods that ask subjects to answer questions related to their capacities, beliefs, attitudes, feelings, or experiences and whatsoever. The method varies from unstructured interview, otherwise called the clinical interview, to relatively structured interview, otherwise through well-formulated questionnaires and standardized tests. Unstructured interview is one best example of clinical interview, wherein the Piaget's method of questioning a 5-year-old child about his understanding of dreams. He used a flexible conversational style of questioning to prompt the child to express his ideas in detail and give a complete picture of his dream. Unstructured interview has got two major advantages. One is it encourages a subject to express their thoughts in a way that has close proximity with their everyday thinking process. Second one is it provides more information in less time. Apart from these trends, these methods do have its own flaws. First one is that it should be checked for the accuracy of information provided by the subject, as there is a possibility of making up the answers for one or the other reason. Second one is that the subjects who are poor in their verbal ability cannot put forth their ideas clearly. And the third one is that the strength of flexibility of this method becomes a weakness, as the questions would be framed differently for different subjects. The structured interview method of collecting data has got a set of questions either formulated by the researcher or standardized test, and the subjects are questioned in the same order. This technique is considered to be efficient to the clinical interview method, as information from many subjects can be procured at the same time. Also, the answers have a chance of being tabulated by computers and subjected to consolidation and analysis easily. However, problems of depth in information and accuracy of data arises, for which case studies comes into position. Case study is a method of collecting data wherein a particular subject of interest is studied comprehensively to obtain a great deal of information. Case studies are often in clinical researches, as their approach gives descriptive case details that offer important insights into the understanding of the subject's behavior. Though case study is an elaborate method, the conclusions drawn from studying a subject cannot be applied to another subject, as every individual varies. Also, the chance of the investigator being biased in the interpretation of data is too high in this method. As the expedition for scientific knowledge widens day by day, the possibility of exploiting people is on the rise. It is here where the ethical issues and concerns gain significance. As we are concerned with the study of children, the ethical concern seems to be more complex than any other research areas. Certain concerns that need to be addressed are as follows. The first one, children are more vulnerable to physical, mental, and psychological harm in comparison to adults. The second is, immature mentality of the children poses a big challenge of being assessed or evaluated. American Psychological Association and Society for Research in Child Development had come up with special ethical guidelines for research with children to address the above said issues. Some of the basic research rights drawn from these guidelines are important to be dealt in this module. The first one is protection from harm. When any sort of physical, mental, or psychological harm seems possible, an alternate method of procuring data should be considered. Second is informed consent. Consent of significant others of the child subject, such as parents or school officials, should be obtained in writing. Moreover, in case of unwillingness after the consent, the child has a right to be freed from the research at any point of time of the research. Third is privacy. The identity of the subject shall be concealed if the subject feels so. The fourth one is knowledge of results. The child subject possesses the right to be informed of the research results and its interpretation. The fifth is beneficial treatment. Children of control group as well as have the right to receive the experimental treatment if found to be beneficial. Hence, the researcher's first and foremost responsibility is to foresee the potential risk that the children would encounter as an effect of the study conducted on them. Then follows the efforts to minimize those risks. The major responsibility is to make sure that the benefits of research outweigh the potential hazards. Now, to conclude, hope this section had given you an elaborate insight of the various methods of studying children and its relevant research designs. The advantages and pitfalls of each method and designs were discussed over the other, which would prompt you to consider the best method of studying children. Bye for now. Meet you in the next module. Thank you.